All right. Okay, so we're going to talk about the K-12 connection today. And I have Dr. Brown and I have Shawndra Bowers with me today. We might have Chase Goldman join us here via Zoom. He's unfortunately sick today. So I'm going to start off with just letting them introduce themselves.
Okay, I am Veronique Brown. I am the K-12 Outreach Manager for QuantHub. We are a data literacy company. Currently, we have a contract with the Alabama State Department of Education. So we are able to offer student and teacher accounts to any public school. And the students, we service 7th through 12th graders. We also have internship opportunities and summer camp opportunities. We have migrated now to higher ed, so we're adding to our portfolio of higher ed, 4-year and 2-year colleges, but we initially started in corporate. We are driven by corporate and they are actually feeding us the skills necessary to keep our students and our teachers workforce ready. So, QuantHub. We're based in Birmingham, if anyone wants to come up.
I'm Shawndra Bowers. I'm Associate Director for Learning Experience Design here in the Biggio Center for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning at Auburn University. In my former lives, I have been a K-12 teacher. I've taught middle school and high school, both public and private, at magnet schools. I've also been an instructor at the higher education level, undergraduate and graduate, both face-to-face and online. So in the College of Education specifically. So I have several connections to both higher education and K-12. I've also had the pleasure of working with corporate as well with IT company that serves specifically K-12 districts in the state of Alabama. So got a lot of different lenses through which we can have this conversation today. So I look forward to talking to you all about what we got going on.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to start off with some questions, then we'll give some time at the end for any audience questions. So my first question is, how can K-12, higher education, and industry work together to build a more seamless pipeline of AI-skilled graduates to ensure our future workforce is prepared for the demands of the AI-driven economy?
You made me introduce
that. So in terms of a pipeline, I think it's really important that we start with open communication amongst all of these different sectors, right? We have, I know right here sitting in the room, we have someone from the State Department of Education. We have people from higher education. Chase was definitely going to be our representative from a K-12 school here in the state of Alabama. And just having these kinds of events where people can come together and have open communication and conversation about what's important is the first step. Right? Understanding what the needs are of the students, what the needs are of the employers and the workplaces in which these students are going to be prepared to go out and execute the knowledge and the skills that both the K-12 schools and higher education institutions should be preparing them for. Like, how do we know what that looks like unless we're having those kinds of open conversations? And thinking creatively, thinking outside of the box, the status quo, the way we've always done it is not going to work in the age of AI because we don't even know at this point what our elementary school kids need to be prepared to do. Like our speaker said this morning, we don't even know what we're preparing them for, what kinds of jobs that AI is going to impact and how that is going to change the workplace and the type of knowledge and skills that our students need to be prepared to do. So I think it's really important that we start with these kinds of open conversations across all the sectors and think creatively about how do we prepare them for thinking differently and the processes that they'll need to be able to implement in a very different job market with the proliferation of AI.
I agree. We also need to know about each other's systems. We need that communication is going to open the floor for number one, language. We had a meeting, it was an ecosystem meeting, and some of us that have K-12 and educational backgrounds, we were spitting out acronyms like it was nothing. And one woman stopped us and said, "Hey, I'm uncomfortable here. You keep saying all these things and I don't have any idea what you're talking about. You're talking about IEPs and COSs and LESs and all these things, So first, let's have communication so that we understand each other. And even when it comes to corporate industry, they use terminology that we need to know about. So let's talk about that first. Also, let's talk about systems. I don't think that we're upfront in terms of expectations on both sides. Corporate, we come in sometimes, and I'm coming from different angles as well, because I formerly was K-12 and higher ed, but we come in sometimes and we say, hey, all these things, and K-12 is like, oh, it's wonderful, we want all these things. But, you know, on the corporate side and in higher ed, there are some things that we need. We have to satisfy different metrics. We're being evaluated. We need participants for our programs. So when we're talking with K-12, we need to be honest and say, hey, we can give you these things, but we also need students to show up. We also need teachers to use our products with fidelity so that when you say that what we're doing is not working, it's true and not based off of you really not using our product the way that we ask you to use it. So there's some training there. We need for K-12 to give training to higher ed and to corporate to say, hey, these are the things that our students have on their plates. Here are the skill sets that they're deficient in. Here's how you need to communicate with them so that we can maximize what it is we're doing with each other. So I think there needs to be those conversations, but there needs to be authentic, strategic conversations so that we're not just talking, but it's a structured talk where everyone is getting what they need in order to be sustainable.
Definitely. So as you're talking about some of these strategies and how to utilize these products, can you each touch on some examples that you've experienced of successful AI integration across these different sectors?
So I'll talk about, so I'm going to back up for a minute. Working with the Biggio Center, some of you all are familiar with the fact that a year and a half to almost 2 years ago that our center jumped in and created a teaching with AI course for higher education faculty. We rolled that out to our Auburn faculty first, then it expanded to the SEC, to the Alabama Community College system. Now it's used across the country and internationally. We've learned a lot of lessons from that. We did not espouse to be the experts. We were curating information and learning together. We were encouraging curiosity and practice and play with AI amongst higher education faculty, and just saying, hey, you have lots of feelings about what is happening right now, and it's okay however you feel about it, right? So starting people from where they were, meeting them where they were, and helping them to see the potential and the possibilities that AI presents in terms of teaching and learning. We've taken a lot of those lessons from that teaching with AI course for higher education faculty, and we've now created a teaching transformative learning, teaching and learning course for K-12 teachers. And we're really looking forward to rolling this out. November the 1st actually is when this is going to become available broadly to the public, to K-12 teachers, to implement some of the lessons learned there. What we've learned a lot in the previous course that we rolled out is that the conversation, the discussions, the sharing of ideas and examples, tools that people have tried and what has worked and what hasn't worked, how students have responded to implementation of AI tools and practices in those classrooms is really where the power comes in, right? They're expanding our repertoire of what we can do. Is what we want to build into this K-12 version of the course that we're going to be rolling out. So we're creating those same kinds of opportunities, you know, saying, hey, yeah, here are the tools that, you know, out there on the market. It's no way to keep up with all of what those look like, right? They're constantly expanding every single day and becoming more niche, like we heard earlier in the keynote. And so that's not what we want to see continue to happen. What we want to see happen is people experimenting and sharing those experiments and learning from one another. And that's really where we want to continue to move forward.
So I think the evolution of QuantHub is based on some success indicators. We started off with corporate. We still have corporate as one of our main clients. So we had people like McKinsey and Chick-fil-A and Alabama Power saying, hey, we have some needs in terms of data analytics, our employees understanding how to use data and what have you in AI. Can you provide an assessment platform? So we devised the assessment platform, and through that, we had to provide instruction for remediation on those things that they were weak in. So they're spending so much money doing that. It was like, hey, is there any way for you to drill down? So lessons learned, start earlier. Okay, so that was pushed down to us from corporate. So then we started working with K-12. We devised a platform, and I hate to say this, we had to almost make it teacher-proof because we're dealing with districts that have teachers teaching out of content. Some may not be very comfortable in this area of study. We found that many of the domains, when it came to standardized tests, were lower in things tied to data. Okay, so we had to deal with that reality and reading levels of students and what have you. So comfort of teaching, dealing with ability levels or reading levels or literacy levels of students, lessons learned, got to drill it down. So we drilled it down to 8th grade reading level, made sure to differentiate the instruction, listening to teachers in terms of that need, dealing with ESL, special education needs, and a need to put this in bite-sized pieces. So another lesson learned. Teachers are so overwhelmed with so much in terms of having to teach what is on their courses of studying. It's like, hey, we want to do this, but we only have 10, 15 minutes. What can we do? So we have broken it down into micro lessons where students and teachers can learn things in as little as 10 to 15 minutes, building up to mastery over key concepts. So teachers can use it in as little as a bell ringer, or if they want to use it during, okay, the big push now, small groups. So while teachers are having to work with students in small groups, some of the students can work on QuantHub, still working on aligned skills, or we have resources where we've expanded it to supplement courses so teachers can use our resources for full instruction. And we've also worked with the State Department of Education to create a data science class, applied data science class that works as a math course substitute. And we have applied data analytics that can be used in a CTE course. We have wraparound training for our teachers. They are paid for the training. They receive a mentor. We will go in and actually model it. They come with a nice resource kit with lesson plans, the slide decks already created, access to spreadsheets so that in different areas so that we can establish relevance. How is data being used across different sectors? So all of that is in a nice package. That is from lessons learned and feedback from the teachers. Our product team is always listening to teachers and students. We have beta testers. We pay them for it. Hey, look at our platform. Tell us what's wrong. Tell us what's right. So we're shifting. So we're staying connected with what we're doing with our business and industry people. They're helping to feed us content. The teachers and the students are helping us develop our platform so that it's more user friendly. And because of that, higher ed is saying, okay, we need this too. So now we have branched off and we're in higher ed. We're in the community colleges. We're in 4-year institutions. Just met someone from Auburn, from the data analytics department. So we are trying to, that's what we need to do as industry people. We need to pay attention, and we need to be able to shift whenever necessary to make sure. And if we need to, we need to be the go-between. Hey, higher ed says they need this. Industry says that they need this. K-12 says they need this, but they said it needs to be delivered this way because these are the types of students that are coming to them, and just trying to have this ecosystem. And that's another thing I want to talk about later on, because Auburn is one of the people that are major players for the new STEM ecosystems that are coming out, where they are bridging the gap between K-12, higher ed, and industry people. And they're working with the new STEM council that's being revamped, that Governor Ivey has funded to make all these things happen. So it's happening. I promise you, it's happening. And they are trying to enlist key players to make it happen. You just gotta play.
Definitely. So we're hearing about the needs that K-12 and higher education need from the industry. And so we're thinking maybe about personalized learning for each of these different sectors. So AI really does have a potential to personalize learning for our K-12 students. So how can industry and higher education support this by providing maybe the necessary tools, research, and expertise?
You want me to go first? You want to go first? Okay. All right, so AI can do certain things, but there are limits to AI. So educators need to know, hey, you're not gonna be out of a job because we need subject matter experts. We need people to really evaluate what AI is outputting to make sure it's actually aligned with the objectives and the needs of the schools and of the students. So that's something that we need our industry people to do, our higher ed people to do, and K-12 take some responsibility to make sure that, yeah, AI can provide that in terms of, hey, you have that blockage of how to think things through. But once you feed some information to them and they provide that output, you've got to go back and evaluate these things to actually make sure that it's happening. One activity that we do with teachers is DOK levels. What's that acronym? Yeah. It's not about, it's harder. It's what are you doing with the information that you have and you're using it in multiple tiers, in terms of multiple uses. So if AI can spit it out to you and say, hey, I want a question on this topic and I want all DOK levels to be represented. But we need teachers, we need people in industry, we need people in higher ed to actually look at that and say, okay, it did that, it said that for that question, but does it actually do that? Or what do I need to do to add to this and jazzy it up so that it actually meets this indicator as being a DOK 2 or 3 or 4? So that's what we need to do, work collectively to make sure that whatever AI is outputting, we are making sure that we're being responsible to verify that it's doing what it needs to do for each of the respective areas.
Awesome. I think it's really important that we take kind of a two-pronged approach to personalized learning in the K-12 setting. And what I mean is that we have to look at it from how are we empowering teachers to create learning opportunities and learning environments that are individualized and personalized to every student and every learner that they have in their care, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but also from the other approach is how are we empowering students with the AI tools in their hands to take control of their own learning journey, right? How can we help them to understand what AI can do, what AI can't do, and how they can use it to improve their own access to information and creativity and productivity for their own learning purposes, right? So one of the things that we've done in the Biggio Center is we started with, of course, higher education, college students. We've created a resource that's specifically targeted towards the students themselves, right? So we have lots of faculty development. I'll come back around to that. But we said, we can't teach the faculty how to use these tools for teaching and administrative purposes and tell them they should be allowing the students to use AI in their assignments and their assessments and in their learning without helping the students. That's a double burden. Not only are you now asking a teacher to teach the subject matter, but now you're also asking them to teach students how to use AI safely, ethically, effectively. That's a lot to ask of someone when you're already burdened with covering, the state standards that have to be addressed in a classroom on a daily and stay on track to make sure that they have all the knowledge they need in your subject matter in order to pass the standardized test, right? Like that's a lot to ask a person to take on. And so we started with a resource that is directly to the students that talks about academic integrity. What does that mean? How should you as a student be using AI in your learning journey? It's called the Guide to AI Enhanced Learning. And we named it that specifically because we want them to understand that, your skilling up in knowledge and information and, skills and application it's your responsibility as the learner, and we want them to take that ownership of their learning. And so we teach some things about academic integrity. We teach some things about ethical considerations, security, privacy, bias, hallucinations. We do go into some of the, your response from an AI chatbot is only as good as the prompt, and your being able to discern whether or not what you're receiving from an AI chatbot is accurate and up to date and unbiased only goes as far as your depth of knowledge. So the more you know about a subject, the better you're able to engage with the chatbot to get the kind of information out of it that you need to get for your own learning opportunities, right? And so that's one approach. And then like the flip of the coin is you're doing the same kinds of things with the teachers, right? Helping them to understand all of those same aspects. So that the tension between what we're asking teachers to incorporate and integrate into their classrooms is, not in opposition to what the students are wanting to do. We heard earlier that students are adopting AI and using AI, in larger numbers than faculty and teachers. And so we want to make sure that we're empowering both and rising, lifting the knowledge and skills on both sides of that equation so that they meet in the middle and are able to make sure that we're using the AI in effective ways on both sides of the teaching and learning coin.
And so as we're implementing AI into K-12 and higher education, what are some of the biggest challenges during this implementation periods, and how can maybe collaboration across the various sectors really help to overcome these challenges?
I think the big deal is that a lot of teachers are scared of it. We do have some people with mindsets that they are afraid of AI, so we need to demystify that. I've been into some school districts where they lack the technology to effectively implement AI. We think that all schools are the same, but some are still dealing with money or COVID money, and now those computers that they were able to purchase with the COVID money, it's gone, and a lot of those tools are Midfield. I'll give you an example. They said, hey, we were able to purchase all these computers, but they're all broken because when they purchased them, they purchased cheap machines that didn't even have all of the capacity to hold the tools necessary to use AI. So there's some realities here in terms of equity issues between schools, in terms of teachers' fears, district fears, parent or caregiver fears of using it, and devices. It's there. So that's one thing. Couple of things.
Yeah. And then going beyond just the equipment, I agree, absolutely. Infrastructure, access to devices, but even going beyond that is we know that lots of these tools out there have a free version and a paid version.
Yeah.
How many of y'all know that the paid version is going to do a lot more things than the free versions are going to do, right? And so when we're talking about these schools that have inequitable funding, right? Not only can they not update their computers or have the kind of infrastructure that's going to support, high-end computing that might be necessary to generate AI, create, AI generated images or whatever the case may be, or coding or whatever the case may be. They also don't have the funds to purchase subscriptions for their students. And so that digital divide that has always existed when it comes to innovative technology continues to expand, right? Because the people who have the funds and the access to the tools that require funding, AI is expensive. We know this to run it, right? The behind the scenes, the back end to make it work is expensive. And so the companies that have these tools that do amazing things have to recoup their costs. They have to make money. At the end of the day, would you say, yeah, corporate has to be transparent? Metrics, we have KPIs, we have things we have to do, right? And we're going to offer these tools. And so, just understanding from an equity perspective that AI creates a tremendous opportunity, but it also has the potential to continue to expand that digital divide between the haves and the have-nots. And we have to be conscious of that. How can we overcome that?
An example of what you said, we are having to deal with using Microsoft Excel versus Google Sheets. And it may not seem like it's a big deal. It's like, it's the same thing. No, it's not the same thing, because you have some compatibility issues here. So we have some schools like, we need for this data to be placed in this form because our district pay for this subscription and we can't get this, so it's like you're forced to do that, so that means that we need to revamp our, our materials or what have you. That's just a small example, but those examples that seem small can pile up into bigger ones. What schools have already spent their funds on, and then you see, oh, this is great, we need to get this, but they can't because they are already in a contract with this, and they can only afford this version of something, so. I'm piggybacking.
Yes, I think I'm gonna piggyback one more time. And then another thing, that the keynote speaker this morning said that really resonated with me was that we know AI is trained on, massive amounts of data that is biased, right? And he acknowledged that there are data sets that are that there are lots of underrepresentation in those data sets. And so when we're talking about K-12 schools, rural districts and districts that have, lots of disadvantaged, minority, at-risk kinds of students, where is their representation of the data that's been trained, used to train, AI? And, that just that lack of representation will come out, and, their voices, their faces, their perspectives, their cultures, their opinions are not present in the responses that AI gives. And I think that's another challenge that we have to constantly be conscious of. How do we overcome, and how do we compensate for the shortcoming of AI in that respect?
And so as we're tackling some of these challenges, how can we ensure that we have accessible and inclusive access to all of the students?
Does anybody have an answer to that one? Let me start this.
Okay, I'm sorry. In terms of exposure, let's talk about that. There's exposure and then there's equitable exposure. What I've seen in certain schools and certain districts, when you have different companies that come out or different colleges that come out, we want to do exposure activities. Oftentimes they have pre-selected the students that get to come to these things, and they're the top students. And by not allowing all the students, you never really access all the talent that is present there. I'll give an example of with QuantHub. We had a student, because all of the students in the class had access to the platform. There was a student, his name is Sherman, he's in Tuscaloosa City Schools, and I think that's all that I can say. He became our first beta tester, our first intern, because he was mastering skills in QuantHub like crazy. It was like, who is this kid? We need to hire him. So we hired him. Found out later on that Sherman was failing all of his classes. All of them. Okay? So if we had an assembly, a session where special guests could have students, what is the likelihood that Sherman would have been in the room? Okay, so when we're talking about equitable exposure to AI and opportunities tied to this industry that is going to do nothing but grow, are we making sure that the exposure is equitable? And I'll leave it at that.
I think I'll say that we probably need to do a better job of exploring more public-private partnerships. In that we tag corporations, we tag different sectors that have these needs, right? These future needs, and say, hey, you have a major operation in this state, and you need to help invest in the state to prepare your future workforce, right? So it's a lot about workforce development and tagging those folks to, we need some funding, right? There's grant opportunities out there. So being able to identify what grant opportunities make sense for the kind of rollout, AI, preparation rollouts that need to happen in K-12 schools. So I think we've got to think creatively. We've got to stop working in silos. We're all really bad about working in silos, and create more partnerships across sectors that are going to benefit, particularly in the local areas, right? Within your region, within your state, those kinds of opportunities that you need, because your needs are different. So that's what I think. Funding.
In terms of an overall equitable experience, we did our first cohort of interns. We had a partnership, we got a grant partnership with Innovate Alabama, and they funded internships, paid internships for students that use our platform. So 11th and 12th graders could qualify for virtual, hybrid, or in-person internships. So we tried to deal with the equity issue there so that students had access to some pretty powerful companies within the state and did not have to worry about transportation issues. But we also considered that a lot of these high schools are caregivers during the summer. Their parents have to work. They have to take care of their brothers and sisters. So, you know, providing them an opportunity to still get exposure. Here's what we found from that. Surprise outcome. All the students were assigned mentors for the internships, okay? Wonderful experience, you get a mentor. The mentors came back in the survey and said, hey, we need training. We don't know how to communicate all the time with these students, you know? We don't know how to help them be resilient and certain things about showing up on Zoom calls or whatever, check-ins, what is the expectation? How do we guide them through so that, because I'm of a certain age, I'm over 50, I'm gonna leave it at that. Our generations are different. If I tell you to do something, I'm expecting you to do it. I had to calm down. Emily, you have to help me. I'm telling you, we just had this discussion at lunch because Veronique's in her 50s and Emily is not. So we have to say, whatever. My point is that it's real. Okay, we have to acknowledge it, that because that generational shift that generational gap is there, those things matter. And if we want sustainable relationships where it's just not a constant turnover of employees, we have to train the employers on how to deal with the new generation of learners. Back in the day, my parents and my generation said, hey, don't ask questions, just do as I say. We taught our kids to ask questions. And then so when we get these kids and they're like, what's up, you need to do this, well, what about this? And da, 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 da. Some of us get a little antsy because we're not used to that. It's not disrespect. We train them to do that. So a cool thing about building these relationships between industry and higher ed is the training, not just the teachers, not just giving students education, but also training the employers on how to be better employers so that they're actually providing the support that's needed. And also the employers can tell the school districts, hey, when you're putting in these policies where you're allowing students to show up late or not show up on time, and then you're giving them all this time to make up assignments, that's really not a great soft skill. Because if I have a deadline and you don't meet my deadline, I'm going to fire you. So when you go to school, that is a skill, a soft skill that you originally learned in school. You come to class on time, you're showing up to work on time. You're completing assignments in class, you're completing tasks on the job. There's got to be some connect where we say, hey, school district, we love you, but these are still important skills and we need for you. I know you're getting pressure from everyone. I know you're getting pressure from parents. But when the parents are not around, you're still expecting us to hire your kids. So you need to be paying attention to our demands as well. So.
That's perfect. We're hearing more and more about this intersection between industry and higher education and K-12. And so as we're thinking about that, we're thinking about, as we just heard, maybe something with ethics and our key ethical considerations, how can collaboration between the various sectors help to set ethical standards?
I'll start by saying transparency, right? Transparency across the board, right? These corporations that are building AI tools, that are building into existing tools, right? We have our student information systems that now we're saying, oh, AI can help us understand our students' performance and understand, you know, scheduling and understand all these different things that AI, you know, has the power to do to help us administratively. But, you know, what is happening with that data? Where is that data being stored? How is it being used? Who has access to it? You know, what happens to it when those students leave? You know, just all of this, these questions we have about student privacy and student data. We want corporations to be transparent about it. The same holds true for higher education and K-12. You know, organizations, institutions, making sure that we are transparent about how we're using information, right? So I just think transparency is key across all, you know, all the different sectors to make sure that we're holding one another accountable right, for what we're doing and how we're doing it when it comes to AI integration.
I agree. One of the things in my notes, I put transparency, so we're on the same thing. Can I get it? All right. And I also believe you said something about holding each other accountable. In order to hold each other accountable, we have to have that metric there. So we have to share out in terms of what we're all being held accountable for. I'm using us as an example, that's all I know how to do. When we did an alignment, hey, we're gonna prepare students for da. We had to ask our subject matter experts, who are our teachers and our State Department, hey, is this aligned with the course of study standards? We had to do an alignment. So I don't know if other companies are doing things like that. Yes, it takes a little time, but it's worth it for us to be able to authentically say we are in alignment, because we didn't necessarily do all the alignment. We hired someone from the other side to check us and say, no, it's not. Even with our courses that we built, the data science course and the data analytics courses, we hired teachers that actually were top teachers in those areas to go through and check us to make sure. So in terms of ethical considerations, us saying that we are doing something and not actually doing it, we have to be willing to backfill and put in the work to allow the people who are the experts and respect their input to actually come in and check what we're doing before we put it out there, so that teachers don't see it as a waste. That's another thing. Sometimes teachers see it as something extra. But if we're actually doing that alignment on the front end, now we can authentically say, no, it's not extra. This is support for what you already should be doing in your class. So that's one way to do it.
I think the other thing when it comes to ethical considerations is, I hate to repeat what was said this morning, but, thinking about, where the boundaries are about what we're doing with AI, what our students are allowed to do with AI, and articulating that very clearly from the onset, right? Setting very clear expectations up front about what we think is acceptable as a society, as a, in our school, in our district, in our state, whatever the case may be. Just making sure that we set clear expectations and articulating those well about where we think the boundaries are, and being okay, to flex and adapt as things change, that what we think is acceptable today or not acceptable today may change next week or next month or next year or 5 years from now, and just being able to continually evolve as the technology evolves and as the ways that we're using technology in the workplace evolves.
I think talking about the evolution, it's important that we clearly connect with leadership. Oftentimes our teachers in our schools know of changes, but you have district level people that are not staying with it. And so they want things to stay here, but the teachers in the schools are saying, but you sent me to this conference and I learned about the da, and they told us that this is what's coming down the pipeline. You told me to go to school. I'm going to classes. I'm learning in my classes at the university that we need to be doing da. But so our teachers and our administrators are getting all of this knowledge and they're up to date, but not necessarily the people in leadership so that they can support the shift. So, so it's one thing to say it's shifting, but to feel like you're in this box because and feel frustrated because you know what you need to be doing to support your students, but you feel hindered by people in leadership. What kind of accountability is there to make sure that top leadership that is making sure or making teachers and administrators stick to this and are saying that you have to stay and do this, and we don't want the higher ed people, we love them, but they can't come in and do an activity with us because that's not according to what our district plan is. The industry says this, but that's not according to what our district plan is. So we're trying to help on our end, but we're being blocked because the people in certain rooms at the district level are not with us. So how do we do that? Maybe you know the way.
I don't know. We talked about, I kind of mentioned earlier that we're about to roll out a K-12 course, and the way that we started that entire conversation with the librarians across the state, So the Alabama School Librarians Association was having their annual conference here in our city, and we said, hey, we'd love to host a pre-conference with you guys to find out, what is actually happening on the ground in the classrooms, in your schools, in your districts. So we had about 60 people come to the conference, and we talked and we discussed and we brainstormed, what's actually happening with AI in those schools, and representation from large to small, rural to, inner city, all sizes you can think of. We had representation there so that people could actually say, this is what's happening.
What are some of the things they said?
So, we got a lot of feedback about there's just not enough resources, it's not enough training, it's not enough support, we don't have access to tools, we don't have access to, because a lot of that stuff is managed at the district level. So you filters, block things, right? By the time they get to the schools. So they were talking about what are the challenges that they face, not being able to equitably roll things out to all of the students. So, and that you could see the disparities between districts in those conversations, where some had access to things and some had access to things. So, we were learning from those folks that are closest to where instruction is happening, and taking what they were sharing with us to build the resources that they said they needed in order to be able to learn how to integrate AI effectively into their schools.
All right, so we've got 10 minutes left, so I'm just going to open it up to some audience questions now. Okay, go for it.
All right, so we've been talking about AI. I want to zoom out for a second, just think about technology. We'll come back real quick. There's a couple of things. So obviously all day long, we've been talking about the need, and in this session specifically is about K-12, how we can make sure that this is filtering down because the students are using it. So how can we make sure that's happening effectively? But there's another conversation going on about technology right now that seems to spread like wildfire, and that's that we shouldn't be having cell phones in schools. And so my question is, from a messaging standpoint, how do you manage these dual messages of, all right, cell phones are a bad thing in school, but we need to be using these technologies? Go.
Go. I'm not gonna go. I'm not in agreement. I don't have the answer either, but I said that goes back to where I was saying the tension between what we're asking faculty to learn how to do and what we're allowing students to do with it, right? So if I'm telling a teacher, hey, you should learn how to update your assignments and your assessments in your classroom to integrate technology and allow students to use it. But then the district policy is no AI tools and they're blocked. And then students are going home and they're using AI and then they're coming to school and they're getting in trouble. Like you've got to have alignment across what's possible, across allowed. And that's why it's so important to have the clear expectations and guidelines and policies so that everybody's on the same page. And that the same holds true with cell phones, right? Whatever the case may be, you need to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of communication and what's being allowed across any technology, not just AI, not just cell phones, that the district, the school, the parents, the students, everybody's on the same page about the value, the benefit, and what those boundaries are in terms of what we can do, what we can't do in this setting for these purposes.
Well, and just to clarify real quick, I know it's Friday afternoon. I'll at least speak for myself. I know it's been a long week, but I think more of what I'm trying to ask too is that because a lot of places are having these cell phone policies where they don't really have AI policies developed yet in a lot of districts that I've looked at. But do you think that there's a tension between the messaging? If you're a student today, it's got to be a little confusing that on the one hand, you're being told, hey, these are this powerful technology right here, but you're not, I think that needs to stay away. But I also need to learn how to use these emerging tools because I'm going to need that in my life.
Okay, I don't want to look. I have a habit of starting to preach, so let me get the Baptist and the Southern out of me. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm gonna try. Okay, sorry. Okay. The students are angry because we are practicing do as I say, but not as I do. They're seeing teachers and they're seeing administrators with phones. And they're allowed to use technology, but you're telling me we're not. The students are rebelling against inconsistent practices where 1 minute you say that I can use my cell phone and you penalize me when I use it at a certain time, but I see my friend who you're showing favoritism to, they get it and they get away with it. So the enforcement, and this is school-wide, district-wide, they had these policies and they were not enforcing the policies. So when you have a policy and you're not really enforcing the policy with parity, the students are feeling like, I'm gonna rebel and I'm gonna use it and I'm not gonna be responsible, okay? However, in higher ed and in corporate or business, we have restrictions, we have policies, right? When we're sitting in Zoom meetings or whatever, we try to fake it. We're not supposed to be on our cell phones. We're supposed to be visible or whatever. We may have it on Nick, but we sit it. Look, let's just. Okay, but we have policies, okay? You're not supposed to be on your phone when you're doing your work day. So we have policies and we know that there are consequences to those policies. If we're ever gonna get around this, we have to face the reality that cell phones are gonna be the most up-to-date computers that all of our students have access to. And we have to train them how to use the tools that they actually have consistent use of. So I don't know how long this is gonna last because schools are not gonna be able to, unless they're great fundraisers and they have taxes and write grants, all in terms of equity, that's not gonna happen. So the access is what the students already have access to. And a lot of even rural communities are getting special grants for like T-Mobile or Verizon, where they're actually impacting the infrastructure so that these rural communities are getting high-speed internet, so they need these phones. So we've got to find a way to talk to districts or what have you. We need to on the corporate side and even on the, I'll say, higher ed side to let them know, hey, I understand what you're trying to do in terms of control and how we're dealing with safety concerns, but we have to teach them responsible practices. We have to train them on and give them times, because I've seen some schools that say, hey, during these times, we're giving you breaks for you to catch up on your emails, catch up on your messages, and then after that, I need for you to get off and then hold them to that. That is training them for real world. Making them not bring that is not real world. That's not the realities of where we are. So so you're asking me how, first steps, let's have candid conversations with the people that are pushing down these rules to say, hey, in reality, this is not gonna help the kids get them ready, and this is not gonna help us deliver what we need to deliver to make sure that your students are going to have the skills necessary. What can we do to help support this? Okay, here's some guidelines that we have in our company. Can we see us implementing something similar to this in school so that we can have a meeting of the minds and prepare them for the next? Here's reality.
And I think you're absolutely right that there's misalignment in the messaging, and don't think that the younger generation don't notice. We rolled out our AI day back in January. And we had, students coming in, we're talking about these resources that were going to be available to them. And the question that they kept asking us was, okay, you're telling us what we can and can't do with AI, but what about our faculty? Are they using AI to grade our papers? And are they telling us that they're going to use AI to grade our papers? So they're like thinking about fairness, right? It's back to what you're saying. They're questioning, they're looking at, are you telling me to do something or I can't do something that you're doing? So they are coming into college asking those questions of the faculty that are here. So I know they're thinking that, at least in the K-12 setting as well.
What do you think?
So I think I'm still formulating. I think in terms of the cell phones, I hear what you're saying. I think there's also
Where are you coming from? What's your angle? Are you from K-12 or are you from?
higher ed.
Higher
But I
ed,
used to
okay.
work K-12, so
Okay.
it's both, actually.
Mhm.
I think that there certainly have been a lot of mental health challenges in our K-12 students. Some people have attributed that and some of the anxiety to social media and some of the extra drama that adds in school day. At the same time, I'm reading this to myself as much as I am to y'all, because I see the tension between saying, all right, you can't have this, but I mean, I'm here obviously because I'm not against AI. I think that we should be training teachers and we should be training students in how to use it ethically and responsibly and as a value add, so.
But to me, the problem is you're trying to control and force something that's not gonna come naturally later. So I think it's more important to teach students, what the drawbacks are, what are the challenges, and why they should maybe limit those uses.
Responsible use.
Right? Being responsible about how they're using, how often they're using, why they're using, what they're using it for. You have to teach them those things and those values, rather than just saying, don't do it, because that's not gonna help them when they leave that setting and move into another setting where that rule is not in place now. They have to be able to self-regulate.
Yes.
And we have to teach them how to self-regulate.
Hi, my demographic are primarily first year college freshmen, although I will have sophomore and juniors in my course, occasionally a senior. And my question has to do with, I'm really excited about this conversation. I know you're gonna catch the K-12, but right now, those students that are in college right now who are going to go into the workforce, who have not had the AI digital literacy, where would you say that we would start? In my course, I have working in a silo, getting myself trained and going to different workshops and getting certifications in AI, have implemented it in my course. I don't know if you're experiencing this in higher ed, but I think the biggest barrier are the fact that many instructors, professors don't want to have our students use AI in terms of technology. So where would you say to an instructor in a course, how would you engage how would you encourage them to engage students in that learning process?
Okay, guilty plug. QuantHub.
About 30
Okay, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. I'll get your information before we leave, but we have an adaptable platform. We can service you if we have things like ethical considerations dealing with AI, even things like data visualizations, data narratives, being able to take graphics and be able to put text to it, technical text. Well, I'll talk to you, but a lot more colleges are starting to adopt our platform because of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as a follow, also, in addition to that, one of the biggest pieces though is, yes, getting them the digital literacy, but on top of that, and I think you all alluded to that as well, is connecting the purpose. We have to, we have had conversations at our university about, we have to think a lot bigger or else we're going to become plagiarism police and just all this type of thing. So is that a part of your curriculum as well?
As part of our curriculum with our resources, we have the content, but then underneath we have case studies. So that they immediately see, okay, here's the information, but here's a real world application, a case study of why this is important, why you are learning this, how you will see this in the real world. We took that into consideration.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd encourage you to go to Auburn University Library's website and look under the help button. And there is the tutorial that we created called the Guide to AI Enhanced Learning, which if your faculty are not incorporating AI skills and practice into their classes, at least the student can guide themselves through.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank y'all for coming. Go ahead and enjoy your next session.